Kia ora koutou, ko Amy toku ingoa. My name's Amy. Welcome to this very exciting webinar on our sustainability guide. Thank you for joining us. My role within HRNZ is Manager, Professional Standards and Development. And I'm jumping the queue a little bit because we intro ourselves on the next slide, but just so you know who the heck is talking to you right now. I'm Amy, welcome. Yeah, we're super excited to have you here. So I'm now going to hand over to my co-host, my fellow tour guide, Bridget Williams, who's going to intro herself.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, Amy. It is such a pleasure to be here and to be part of HRNZ SDG Week. So if you joined us at the panel last week for the Sustainability Pep Talk panel, it was fantastic. And we are, as Amy said, super excited for this webinar today. So if we go to the next slide, as Amy said, myself and her are going to be your tour guide for the day. And a little bit about me and who I am. So kia ora, my name is Bridget Williams. I'm from Christchurch, Otatahi, and I lead a social enterprise called Bead and Proceed. And it's been such a pleasure to collaborate with HRNZ on SDG Week. So as Amy said, she's involved, I'm involved, but so are you. So you are also going to play tour guide for the Sustainability Basics Guide today. And what that means is we really want your participation, your energy. So if you have any questions and if we ask you a question, then please do interact with us using the chat function below. Next slide.
Awesome. So you're going to notice throughout the session that Bridget and I just hand very naturally off to each other between slides. So what I'm going to do now is just give you a very brief intro into the HR guide for sustainability, which we're calling the basics sustainability. Now, before I talk a little bit about the specific guide, I just want to give a massive shout out to our other rebranded suite of HR guides, which we've just released our first sort of tranche of. They're available for members. However, the Sustainability Basics Guide, we think is just so important that everybody can get, a foot in the door. They can get a bit of a foothold, somewhere to start with sustainability and sustainable practices in HR. We've actually made it available free to everybody, regardless of if you're a member or not. So you can access that on the resources tab under HR guides, the basics on our website. So as Bridget said, we're going to send you a bit of a pack, we're going to send you a bit of a pack of information after the session, and a link to the guide will be in that, along with some look at those, but also if you've got other people who you think, people that you want to just kind of give a little bit of a gentle nudge to, send the basic sustainability there guide. We want as many people read it. It's accessible, and yeah, it's over to you. Just sort of guides. They're really important. As with all of the other guides, we want them to give a really good sort of foundational questions, FAQs. Bridget's going to go into a little bit more detail, since as I would consider her, of the two of us, the sustainability. You could find you need it or you're interested in it.
Yeah, that's right. So this guide is completely free. Because important, and it's about making this accessible to everyone and anyone. So I like you how to calculate your carbon emissions. It's not sort of that, it's not that guide. This is the first step to a journey. So that also means that in terms of giving you the really detailed elements of sustainability, that's not what this webinar is going to give you some suggestions on, where you can go to further, further along your sustainability initiatives and practices. So this guide is going to walk us through the basics of sustainable development, encourage you to take the first steps towards sustainability, and discuss how to engage your employees and stakeholders in a sustainability conversation. So it's those first steps. And it's also important to know that it doesn't have everything in it. You know, this is probably going to be a living document that we're going to enhance and evolve and develop over time. And we would really love your input as well. Next slide, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfectly said, Bridget. And I think that's kind of the thing with sustainability, as we see it at the moment, is, you know, the experts are continually learning. And so we want to make sure that we are really at the top of our game in terms of making sure that the things that are in this guide are accessible, they're sustainable, and they're useful for people. So keep an eye on it. It is a living document. To the agenda for today, though. So what we're going to go through are some kind of a bit of an intro to sustainability and sustainable development, what those things mean. And then Bridget's going to give us a bit of an overview of what the SDGs actually are. If you're new to this, don't worry, you're going to get a crash course in them. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what sustainability looks like when it intersects with HR practices. We're going to talk really practically through how you engage your employees. We're going to talk about the business case and business plan that we've included in the basics guide. And then at the end, we're going to have a bit of Q&A, and then we're going to round the session off with a super engaging, super inspiring call to action to send everybody away from the session as jazzed about sustainability as Bridget and I are. Next slide, please.
Excellent. So the first question that we want to ask is, what does sustainability mean to you? So please take some time to just put some answers in the chat. It could be one word. What does sustainability mean to you in one word? It could be a sentence. Feel free to add an emoji that represents sustainability to you. But as I said, you know, you are just as much a part of this webinar as we are. So take a moment to just write in the chat, what does sustainability mean to you? And the other key thing is, this is a safe space. This is an opportunity for you, no wrong answers. We just want to get a flavor as to what sustainability means to you. So we'll just pause to see if we can get some answers in the chat.
Yeah, awesome. And great point there, Bridget. I was just going to add on to that as well, around this being a safe space. So as Bridget says, there's no wrong answers with this. We also want to create a space where you don't feel like anything is a silly question to ask. If you're going to put something in the chat, we're here. We just want to be able to encourage people to either take those first steps or continue on in their journey. So yeah, we're open to hearing from you.
And I love seeing some of the answers that are coming already. Not screwing it up for the future. Yep, enough said. Growth, the right pieces, long-term planning. These are great answers. Systems, processes, and practices. Fantastic. Ensuring there's a future for all. Recycling, waste minimizing. So it's interesting, we're not getting the same answer, which is great because sustainability can mean different things to different people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other cool thing to kind of remember is, we see the world from where we stand. And so it's only natural that we're going to get lots of different answers. And so that's really cool. Hopefully for people that are able to see the chat, there might be other great ideas or things that as you're reading other people's answers, you go, yeah, that's awesome. Great to tuck that in the back pocket and think about for later.
So if we move to the next slide, this is the thing with sustainability. And there are sort of two areas. There's the sustainability and there's sustainable development. So there is actually an official definition of sustainable development, and that is development that meets the needs of the current generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So sustainable development, in a nutshell, is actually about intergenerational justice. We have to manage our economy in such a way that does not hinder future generations from meeting their own needs. And that seems so obvious, right? But this definition was only officially defined in 1987, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. So moving on to the next slide, that means that sustainable development really looks at all areas of sustainability. That's economic, social, and environmental. And for so long, sustainability had really only been considered as that environmental piece, right? So when we asked you, what does sustainability mean? All very different answers. But if we were to ask that question maybe 10 years ago, we would have got answers like trees, clean air, being green, but it's so much more than that. And we are now realizing as a society that all three areas, economic, social, and environmental, they're all interconnected. And for us to really achieve sustainable development, then we do have to make sure that we're considering all three areas. And the great thing with the framework that HRNZ is really championing takes on these three areas really well. And if we go to the next slide, this is where I want to introduce you to the Sustainable Development Goals, aka the SDGs. So here they are in all their colourful glory. This is the figure to the left. And now these goals go by many different names, such as the People's Goals, the Global Goals, the Moonshot Goals, and that lovable acronym that I just mentioned before, which you have to really enunciate or else it sounds like something else, the SDGs, standing for Sustainable Development Goals. So the SDGs are essentially a blueprint. It is for sustainable development. So it is a global undertaking for the period of 15 years. And I do say global as all 193 UN member states, including New Zealand, Aotearoa, adopted the SDGs back in 2015. So for some quick math, if we adopted the SDGs in 2015 and it's a global undertaking for the period of 15 years, then that means we have until 2030 to achieve the SDGs, which is crazy. 2030, that is not far away. And these are some massive, massive goals that we are trying to achieve. We're looking at climate action, no poverty, zero hunger, that's eradication of hunger. We're looking at gender equality, good health and well-being, life on land, life below water. And there is a really big question mark around whether we're going to be able to achieve the SDGs by the deadline, hence why the other name for them is the Moonshot Goals. So there are a few reasons why the SDGs are really special. The first is what I mentioned before about the framework looking at all areas of sustainability, economic, social, and environmental. So these are three areas that impact every industry. Every business and organization impacts all three areas. So it means the SDGs are relevant to every organization and business. And it also means that the framework isn't polarizing, right? Because you can care about areas of the economy because they feed into areas of society, which feeds into areas of the environment. And the other reason why the SDGs are so special and what makes this framework so unique is it speaks a global language. So as I mentioned, all 193 UN member states have adopted the SDGs. And now more than ever, if COVID has taught us anything, we need to come together in solidarity. Global citizenship is becoming increasingly important. We're living in countries sort of without borders these days. So that global language is so important. And it also means that the SDGs is the largest framework globally for sustainability. So if you are a part of an organization or a business that wants to speak that global language or it wants to have that global reach, then it's a missed opportunity if you're not using the SDGs to help articulate what you value in terms of sustainable development. Now you'll see to the side of the image is this wonderful diagram called the Sdg Cake Diagram. So this diagram has three layers. You'll see the biosphere, society, and the economy. So the biosphere is the largest layer of the Sdg cake, right? These are the goals that impact where we live. And what sits within our biosphere is our society. So these are, goals that impact people in our communities. And then the smallest layer of the cake is the economy, right? And for us to have a thriving society, we do have to have a thriving economy, but we can't be using the economy at the expense of our biosphere. And what keeps the cake shape, the icing, if you will, between each layer is partnerships for the goals, right? SDG 17, mahi tahi. And so it's so important because some believe this goal it's the least important, but others, such as myself, believe it's the most important SDG because we can't do this in isolation. We must work in collaboration. And that is why HRNZ really sees the SDGs as being a fundamental framework for people in the HR sector. Because if you see that middle layer, society, right, that's all about people. And the SDGs came about because of people's actions, and it's going to take people intervention to address these massive challenges. So who does, what area in business and organizations has more to do with people? That is the HR sector. So it's so inspiring to see HRNZ really champion the SDG framework and see how the SDGs ties in to HR practices. Now, if we go to the next slide, this is a shameless plug, but that was just a small snapshot of what the SDGs are all about. If you're wanting to know more about the SDGs, then please come along to our webinar that is happening this Friday at 12 p.m. And again, we're doing events and webinars all throughout the week to celebrate HRNZ SDG week. So you can learn more about the SDGs this coming Friday. So please make sure you register for that if you'd like to know more about this fabulous framework. And it's open to all and it's free. So I will throw now to Amy for the next part of the webinar.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bridget. I think that, before I met yourself, the SDGs were something that, I'd heard mention of in the news a few times, but really getting to kind of learn a little bit more about them, sort of finding a grounding within them is really, really important. And reflecting on what you said about that HR is arguably the best place within a business in order to influence people, kind of leads us into this next question that we want to ask you, our wonderful attendees and also co-tour guides. So we recognise that within the profession of HR, people have really different levels of influence or the ability to influence based on, what their role is, how big their organisation is. What we really want to kind of bring home with this webinar, but also with SDG Week as a whole, is really give everybody something, hopefully a raft of things, but at least one thing that they can feel empowered to do, irrespective of whether they are, the general manager, people and culture, whether they're the chief people officer, whether they're an HR coordinator, recruitment coordinator, whoever you are, whatever your role is. We really want to show that you can create and drive really positive change in the space of sustainability within your business or your organization. And the whole kind of aim of the basics guide within sustainability is to make sure that everybody can sort of take away from that what they can do as a person, and then sort of more broadly what their teams can do or what their organizations can do. So kind of in that theme, what we'd really love to hear from you all about is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your organization's engagement with SDGs? Do they know about them at all? Are they part of your bread and butter? So 1 being not at all engaged, never heard of them before, we'll need to go and Google them after the session or read through the material that we send out, through to 10 being incredibly engaged, you're basically an expert. Bridget and I want your number and your email address so we can contact you after this session. So just pop a number in the chat. Don't think too hard about it. Just kind of, whatever comes to your mind first. And then also what your role is. So the number, how you'd rate your organisation, and then what your role, just so that we can get a bit of a sense of how best we can sort of help support you during this session. So just take some time now to chuck that in the chat. And we'll come back to that a little bit later, but really appreciate everybody sharing there. That's super awesome. I think we've got a good range, which is great, because I think everybody, there is a role for everybody. As Bridget says, it takes people, and it's going to take all of us, this sort of collective effort. I like the 6 question mark. That's great. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's about taking that first step. Awesome. Cool. So keep those coming through, people. Really appreciate you sharing. And if we can move over to the next slide. Awesome. So I suppose this next sort of part for me is kind of the crucial part in terms of where the rubber hits the road with HR practice and sustainability. So as Bridget's already said, you know, I think that a lot of our previous thinking has been around sustainability just being, you know, making sure that we're clean and green. What we now have a greater understanding of is that sustainable practices actually intersect with almost every process, policy, piece of activity that we do as people in the workplace, particularly when it comes to HR. So we think that sustainability exists in every single phase of the employment cycle. And what we really want to do with this slide is just to take some common domains of HR, practice of knowledge, and just give a really brief kind of snapshot, I suppose, using the beautifully coloured tiles of the SDGs to show where we think there is this intersection between HR practice and some of these SDGs. So it's really important to kind of note here that for every business, this might look a little bit different. So you might find that with health, safety and wellbeing in your organisation, you have SDG 3 and I don't know, maybe SDG 5 or SDG 8 that you think applies to your health, safety and wellbeing policy or practice. There's no wrong answer. So we really encourage you to kind of, as part of the reflection following the session, to go and to think about within the different parts of HR in your organisation, and also just the different parts of your organisation, where you think these SDGs have where they show up, how they intersect. In the basics guide, we run through this in heaps more detail. Basically, everything that Bridget and I are going to cover today, we run through heaps more detail in the guide. So we give examples under each of these different sort of parts of HR about what sustainable practice looks like when it's alive and in action. So if you do want a bit more detail, go to the guide, check it out after the session. What we wanted to do here is just to kind of deep dive into one of the areas and just give a couple of different examples of where at a high level and then at a more granular level, the SDGs interact with HR processes and practices. So if we can have the next slide, please. Perfect. So the one that we've picked is remuneration and rewards. So you can see with those beautiful coloured tiles there, we think that these are some examples of some SDGs that have a really good intersection, quite a clear intersection with Rem and rewards. So some examples of sustainable practice within the area of Rem and rewards might look like having the living wage and not just minimum wage in your organisation. That might look like reviewing your lowest paid workers and maybe reframing the value of the work that's done outside of historical or standard job sizing techniques. Pay equity is a really obvious one. So making sure that you've got really clear, transparent processes around pay equity in your organisations, making sure that kind of you look at sustainable pay both within your organisation and outside of it. If we think about, you know, some sectors, you have some areas of the sector where they can pay really highly and others can't. It's about thinking, I think, outside of yourself and your own sphere and how what you do impacts other people. I think for me, that's the beauty of HR and sustainability, and where they kind of marry up, is it almost gives us a bit of a license to make sure that what we're doing isn't only doing good for our people, but it's doing good for kind of the wider community as well. So what I'm going to do now, these are some very high level examples of how some of the SDGs can show up in Rem and rewards as an example. I'm going to now hand to Bridget, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the Sdg targets and how these can actually help create an action plan, some really specific goals for your organisation. So if we can have the next slide, please.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. So at face value, when you look at the SDGs, they do just look like pretty colours and fluffy words, right? Like, what does gender equality mean? What does life below water mean? But they've actually worked it out that there are specific targets that have to happen for that SDG to be achieved. And there are 169 targets and 232 indicators. Now, there's a lot of school of thought about the targets, because when you look at the targets, you might think, oh, that doesn't really apply to Aotearoa New Zealand, or that really seems like, you know, government standards and government practices as opposed to, you know, what I could do in an HR practice. But the great thing is with the SDGs is there's an element of flexibility and nimbleness to them, right? You can take them and sort of mold them to what suits you and your organization's values. But of course, you can't go so far down the spectrum that you lose sight of the global mission, because these are 17 global goals, right? But here's just 2 examples of how the SDG targets can actually be incredibly and directly linked to HR practice. So if we look at gender equality, for example, target 5.5 is ensure women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision-making in political, economic, and public life. So, you know, for any organization or business that really wants to champion diversity and inclusion, and especially women's empowerment, then target 5.5 is going to be incredibly relevant to you. Another great example of how the targets can also be directly linked to remuneration and rewards is target 8.5, and that is by 2030 achieve full and productive employment and decent work for all women and men, including for young people and persons with disabilities, and equal pay for all work of equal value. So again, these are some really specific targets that you can actually use to articulate what you are doing towards sustainable development. Amy had a really great way of explaining what the targets are. They are essentially a cheat sheet, right? So if you are wanting to know where, you know, what do we value as an organization, and what do we want to champion in the area of sustainability, then do look at the targets so you can see not only what that SDG is trying to action, but you've actually got a tangible action for your organization to work towards. So Amy mentioned before that you're going to be getting a whole bunch of resources after this webinar. And one of the resources that's included in the pack is the Sdg Targets table. So that's a resource that Bead and Bridget has put together for you, where you can see all of the 169 targets. So when you are going through the process of deciding what areas of the SDGs do you connect with, it can be very tempting to do what I call SDG bingo, where you go, okay, well, you know, we have a lot of females in our leadership team, so clearly we tick SDG 5, and, you know, we have a mental health day, so that must link to SDG 3. And look, doing that exercise, that's a great place to start, but we also encourage you to go even deeper in that understanding and look at the targets as a cross-check to make sure that what you're actually working towards is what the target specifies. So yeah, we hope that those resources are really helpful for you. And this is just a short example to see how the targets can have a direct action and link towards HR practices. So moving on to the next slide.
So excellent explanation there, Bridget. Just one other thing that I kind of wanted to touch on in relation to something that you said there around, you know, making sure that what you're doing in terms of moving towards a goal for these different SDGs and the targets is I think some people, you know, we have this conception of what something actually means, but in practice, you know, being able to have something that you can kind of, I suppose, test your organization or your workplace's practice and make sure that it's doing everything that you kind of want it to do. So in a way, it's kind of it's almost like a way to build an assurance that actually the thing that you're moving towards is the thing that you want to be moving towards. And like Bridget said, it's a cheat sheet. I mean, you know, I think the first time I looked at the SDGs, I was overwhelmed is probably an understatement, going, oh my gosh, we as a world need to do all this stuff by 2030. Holy moly, like that's a lot of work for us to do. Like the beauty of the targets is that the work's really been done to break this down into really bite-sized, palatable kind of chunks. And so if as a business or an organization, you're looking at these and you're going, well, you know, SDG 5 is really important to us, but, you know, we don't know where to start. Those targets are the cheat sheet. They're the things that you can directly build into your business plans and your goals as something to strive towards. So I think they're really awesome. Make sure you check them out with the material after the webinar finishes. So yes, so what we want to do now is to talk a little bit about how the content that we've whizzed through very quickly, how we actually put this into practice. So Bridget's given you a bit of an overview of the SDGs. I've told you a little bit about, you know, where they show up in HR. Bridget's given you a bit of an overview about doing that deep dive. So now what we want to do is give you some really tangible things that you can do to put this new learning and also all of the learning that you'll do after the session with our additional material into practice. So we can have the next slide, please. So what we know about getting any kind of positive change, culture change, workplace change, is that engagement is absolutely the key. So it's kind of the most, the most essential part is being able to get buy-in from the people in order to make that change, but also making sure that the decision making that goes into sort of choosing your path, your sustainability path, is reflective of what the people in your organization want, as well as, or I think it's kind of equally as important as the people that are in those decision making roles. So it really, engagement is key in what we've wanted to do within the guide. So all of this information's in the guide, but we've created sort of an engagement process, I suppose, or some kind of top tips about building an engagement process for your organization. We've broken it down into 8 super easy, you know, super achievable steps. What these look like for every organization is going to look really, really different, obviously. So we've given some different examples within the basics guide as a very brief run through. What your engagement process might look like is being able to define the purpose. So what do you actually want your sustainability plan, your goals to achieve? What is the purpose of them? Then being able to provide the education, so you sort of get everybody on board. You can make sure that everybody kind of has a base level of understanding, which I think is super important if we think about the ultimate goal of the SDGs being to leave no one behind. It's really awesome to be able to create that level of understanding, that shared knowledge, that really accessible language, so that everybody kind of understands where it is that you're going and why. The next step is obviously to involve your employees. So this really, for me, Bridget, I might hand off to you to talk a little bit about this. You know, do you think that we think about involving employees and involving people, this needs to also happen at the beginning stage, right? When we're thinking about defining the purpose of what we want an organization's engagement journey to kind of look like.
Yeah, definitely. So you've hit the nail on the head around one of the themes of the SDGs is to leave no one behind. And again, these are also known as the people's goals. So there's real power in democratizing the Sdg alignment process. So when you and your organization are wanting to work out what SDG should we align to, or, you know, what goals should we be highlighting that we really champion as an organization, be sure to involve your staff, because not only are they going to, you know, not only does that make them feel valued, but it also means that you're going to be getting, you know, grassroots action and ideas. You know, there's that collective buy-in of everyone moving towards these goals, not because the organization has said these are the ones we care about, but because everyone sees how, you know, what they value and the work that they do day to day has a high level impact at a, you know, on a global level. So there's real power in that, which brings us to the next point around that empowering of employees, linking back to making sure that you're getting ideas from your employees. And, you know, involving your employees can look like sending out a survey, you know, as a start, just to see, you know, what SDGs and what areas of sustainability do they care about. It could be, you know, running workshops or ideation sessions, or having a brainstorm SDG action wall, principle, where no idea is a stupid idea. And the empowering of the employees is about making sure that there's accountability to actioning combining action with the SDGs that you've aligned to as an organization. So that could be creating a green team, or creating a real cultural shift around the SDGs. So it could be having, an SDG champion that you recognize once a month. So it really becomes part of the fabric of the organization. It's not just this tacked on thing, because the biggest mistake I see with organizations and businesses is when they leave the sustainability aspect just with the sustainability team or just with the executive. There's so much power when you involve all your staff. And again, it comes back to the theme of the SDGs, which is to leave no one behind. And then the real glue around the action is to make sure that it's part of the policy. Implement the SDGs with your policy. So it is really part of the culture and the fabric of the organization. So whether you have an employee handbook or a code of conduct, you want to weave the SDGs through that as well. And again, that theme of weaving, involve your vendors, suppliers, and other partnerships that you have. This is where the procurement practice and your supply chain is a great place to start and to reflect when you're looking at where can you make SDG impact. There's, just deciding on who, the cleaners that you have, right? To come in and to clean your office spaces, make sure, are they also aligned with the living wage? Do they champion diversity and inclusion? What sort of cleaning products are they using? Are they good for the environment? Because if you really are going to champion the SDGs, then you need to make sure that you're weaving it through all areas of the organization. And, the procurement space is a whole nother webinar that we could talk about in terms of the SDGs, but there are some great organizations out there that are doing awesome stuff in the procurement place, and it's low-hanging fruit. It's a great place to start, and that's what we're trying to encourage you with the basics guide, is to just take those small steps. And then of course the next part is making sure that you track your progress and communicate results. So if you joined us with the sustainability pep talk panel that we had just last Friday, Oliver Hunt said a really great statement, which is, what doesn't get measured doesn't get managed. So you got to make sure that you're tracking your progress, right? Because how are you going to improve if you can't measure it? And also that leads to celebrating your results, celebrate those milestones, communicate them, share them on LinkedIn, share them on your website. It's really important, again, that this is you're highlighting how, what you're doing towards the SDGs, sharing ideas, and making sure that no matter what stage of the sustainability journey that you're on, so long as you're challenging yourself to do better each year, that's the most important thing. And the last aspect is to be open to evolution. So the world of sustainability is fast-paced, it is moving quickly, more data and information is coming out more rapidly, more than ever, and you're going to need to be able to adapt and be nimble and be open to constantly learning, and know that we can't get it perfect straight away. I think another big mistake that I see is when businesses think, for us to be sustainable, we have to make those quantum leaps and do those massive goals, right? But it's not actually about the goals. It's actually about the systems you have behind to achieve those sustainable goals. That's the most important piece. So again, these are 8 steps that we have taken some time to really think about around how a business can kickstart its sustainability journey and engage all of its team to be involved in the process to maximize impact. And you can check out more about this information and the steps in the guide.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a point that you made there, Bridget, which I think is a really important one, is about, sharing where you're at, and I think sometimes it's a really good idea to share as well if you haven't quite made the goal or you haven't quite hit the level or the standard that you've aimed for. I think it's good in 2 ways. It shows that you don't have to be, we're not aiming for perfection, as you said. Being able to start is awesome, and even if you might not have met the goal, if you've shifted a way of working within your business from something that perhaps wasn't sustainable to something that's, if not exactly where you wanted it to be, definitely better than where you were before, I think that's an awesome thing to celebrate. the other really great thing I think that comes from sharing is that you can create kind of accountability partners, I suppose. So people that are maybe outside of your business, or friends or peers, or other people that you interact with either online or in person in your workplace or outside of, where you can challenge them, they can challenge you, to make sure that you are kind of pushing each other. And that I think you can also kind of create some cool competition in a funny way. So going, if you it's not about gamifying it exactly, but sometimes I think things like this are I think they can seem less scary if you're doing it with other people, if you're doing it with other workplaces, and having a little bit of healthy competition in there is sometimes a good way to just kickstart that journey. So yeah, as Bridget said, there's heaps more detail. We give examples of what these different steps look like in the basics guide as well. So really try to make it as easy for people as possible to pick the stuff up and implement it wherever you are in your workplace and your sustainability journey. So if we can have the next slide, please. Oh, great. So I'm going to hand back to Bridget, but I'll just do the intro for this part. Part of this brilliant guide that we've got some really awesome, very practical templates, which will help identify where you want to start from and then where you need to go with your sustainability journey. So Bridget, do you want to give a very brief run over of some of these templates?
Yeah. So again, we've really taken the time to give you a high quality resource where you can take these templates and just run with it. And by the end of the exercise and by the end of the time that you've filled out the templates, you've actually got a really great foundation on what your SDGs are for your organization, what your targets are, and what are the actions, and even a 3-year plan and business case to put to your executive to make sure that there's that buy-in from all levels. So I can't recommend the templates enough. We've put a lot of thought into them, even down to the detail where we have used the templates and included examples. So when you go through the template, you can see that we've used the example of an accounting firm. So it might be, what would just taking time to reflect on, what unique strengths and skills does an accounting firm offer, and how do they, what SDGs would they link to? So again, really detailed templates, because we want to give HRNZ members and the community beyond a helpful resource so you can hit the ground running when it comes to kickstarting your sustainable development practices. So do give those 2 templates a good review. And with the other resources, such as the SDG booklet and the SDG Targets tables, you've got all the resources to really, to get together with your team to make a lot of impact in the SDG space. So I'm going to throw back to you, Amy.
Awesome. Thank you, Bridget. If we can have the next slide, please. So we, in putting together both the presentation for this webinar, but also the guide itself, we recognise that there are lots of challenges to starting that journey, whether it's a journey around sustainable development, sustainability in your workplace, whether it's a journey about maybe a more specific part of some of the SDGs like diversity and inclusion. It's difficult. It's challenging, and we know that there are lots of roadblocks that sometimes stop individuals or teams from being able to actually start. So, I mean, these are just a few examples. We've kind of put these up here with the hope that they'll resonate with you. I mean, we don't want people to have challenges, obviously, but we recognise that they definitely exist in people's workplaces. So we've just kind of wanted to call a few of those out, some common problems that we've come across when we've spoken about people in terms of sustainable development in their workplaces. And kind of one of the things that we wanted to achieve with this slide is, I think Bridget and I discussed this when we met up last week to talk about, the session and what we wanted to get out of it. I think it would be, an ideal for us is that we get enough people engaged in sustainable practice in HR to be able to create kind of a little community of people, hopefully a huge community eventually, but a community of people where you can come together, you can discuss these challenges, you can help troubleshoot with other people. Being able to have a collection of people that are on really different stages of that journey means that, people that are more advanced can share with people that are just starting out, there can also be a reciprocal, relationship there where somebody who's just starting out has ideas that somebody who's further along might not have considered, and so they can implement those into their workplace. So I suppose part of what we wanted to talk about just very briefly here is, if you are somebody who is really keen to kind of be an accountability partner for other either HR professionals or somebody else that's really keen to kind of kick off in the sustainability space, we'd really encourage you to take time to read through the resources that we send out after the session. And then if you think, you know what, I really want to do something, I want to be a part of a community like that, then respond to that when you get those resources. And once you've had a chance to have a think through, you can email myself, or you can email one of our HR inboxes. We want to kind of create, I suppose, what we want to impact and affect change, right? So any way that we can do that, any way that we can kind of get that ball rolling and bring people together is an awesome way for us to be able to help out from the position that we're in as HRNZ. So if you've got any questions specifically related to your own challenges and you want to pop them in the chat, feel free to go ahead. If we've got time at the end, we'll pick up a couple of those. And if we've got time after the session, then we're happy to go back and respond to people individually. But if we can have the next slide, please. Cool. So now's Q&A time. We've got a couple more slides that we want to be able to kind of go to after this one. So if anybody's got any burning top of mind questions that they'd really like Bridget and I to try and answer on the spot for you, no pressure, Bridget, please pop them in the chat now. Totally fine if there are none. We understand that it's a lot of information to get, but yeah, if there's anything that's really burning that you'd like us to have a crack at with you now, drop it in the chat. We'll give you a couple of minutes just to have a think about that. Was there anything that you wanted to add, Bridget, just in terms of kind of challenges for people while we give people a couple of minutes to throw a question in?
No, I think I just to echo your point around, there is so much potential for the HR community and brand and partnerships community and the people space to really champion the SDGs. So I reckon it'd be a wonderful idea to grow that community where you can all be accountable to each other, share ideas and resources, share information on sustainability, because it sounds really corny, but we are all in this together, and one business's success is a success for all people, right? And so that would just be my point, just to further articulate that. So what that looks like, we don't know yet, but we're really keen to get your feedback on it, and HRNZ is really keen to be a big agency and catalyst for that. Cool. I see some questions already. Someone's asked, will the recording of the session be shared to refer back to? Well, we are recording it, so I would say yes. And someone also said, will these slides be available as well? Yes, they can be available, and we can include them in the resources that we send to you after the webinar. Cool. Amy.
Yeah.
A question for the initiatives for HRNZ.
So the short answer to that is yes. We've got a whole sustainability section on our website. So rather than go through those individually, I'd really encourage you to go and check out. I think, for us, it was really important that we'd be able to, as HRNZ, kind of walk the talk. So yes, we've selected our own SDGs that we're kind of prioritizing with our own practice. So yeah, jump online onto the website, have a look at those, and be our accountability partner. That's kind of, as we've talked about a lot, no one's kind of in this alone. We're all in this together. As Bridget said, that sounds corny, but it's true. And so I think it's really important that kind of, we are all here to help each other on the journey.
I see a question from Joe. So there will inevitably be conflicts among some of the goals and targets. Achievement of one will be detrimental to another. How might we prioritize? Now, this is a great question. And this is something that, if you are familiar with the Millennium Development Goals, the predecessors of the SDGs, that's exactly what they highlighted through that. So the Millennium Development Goals focused on radically reducing poverty. They were just 8 goals, but also for a period of 15 years. And it was at the expense of creating detriment to the environment to improve and uplift people out of poverty. And that's the reason why when the SDGs were created, they realized, hold on, we can't be, if we're going to be doing we're going to make positive impact in one area, it can't be at the detriment of the other, which is why the SDGs look at all areas of sustainability, economic, social, and environmental. So I'm sure there will be another framework after the SDGs when we get to 2030 that will take the lessons learned from the SDGs to address that issue of when that conflict happens. And that question around how might we prioritize, this is sort of twofold. So the first one that I would say is when you look at the SDGs, they are not in order of priority. They are all important. However, there is one particular SDG that does stand out among the rest, and that is SDG 1, no poverty. And there's a reason for that, and that's because the MDGs, the framework I just explained before, focused on radically reducing poverty, and the SDGs had hoped to finish it. Now we've gone radically backwards with, in terms of SDG 1, no poverty because of COVID. But if there was an SDG to prioritise, it would be that one. But then the other part of that is I just encourage businesses and individuals when they are choosing the SDGs that they align to really think about what are your resources, your connections, your strengths, what are your unique offerings that you give to your clients and to your staff that sets you apart, and to start there. Those are your strengths and those are where you should be aligning the SDGs. But don't just go, great, that's what we do, business as usual. The next step is to challenge yourself to go even further. And if there's an SDG that your staff are demanding action towards, then listen to your staff, because these are the people's goals after all. So Jo, I hope that answered your question.
Great answer there, Bridget. I'm glad you picked that one up and not me. But yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think that kind of speaks to, why we've made all of the resources and all of our talks and webinars this week available and open to everybody, regardless of whether they're a member, whether they're a part of the HR community or not. For HRNZ, I think this is the one topic where we think that we're in a really unique position in terms of being able to kind of influence and spread that word to others and make sure that people have everything in hand that they possibly could need in order to start this journey. So yeah, I think that's it's a really great question, Jo. Very, very good question. I'm conscious that we've got 5 minutes left. So what we might do is, yep, perfect, thank you. We want to just kind of send you away from this webinar as we start to wrap up now with a bit of a call to action. But before we do that, just a reminder, as we've said lots today, after this we'll send out an email which includes a link to or a PDF of the Basics HR Guide to Sustainability, those business case templates, Bead and Proceeds SDGs booklet, and the targets in today's presentation slides. I think following there'll be an opportunity, we'll send out a recording for this webinar as well. So the power is in your hands following this. We are here for any questions or troubleshooting or anything that you might have, and we're really excited to kind of hear about how you use these tools. We want to know, what kind of steps you're looking at putting in place, what kind of steps you'd love to put in place, but it may be kind of hampered by X, Y, and Z, and how we can sort of work to troubleshoot those with you. So take some time to reflect after the session, read through that material, and I'll hand it off to Bridget, if we can jump to the next slide to finish off.
Yes. Okay. So as Amy said, yeah, very keen to hear your feedback and, what can we do to improve? Because obviously this is the Sustainability Basics Guide. Maybe you're wanting a Sustainability Advanced Guide. So yeah, we want to hear that feedback. And remember, this is all part of a much larger event, which is HRNZ SDG Week. So SDG Week is an international event, and HRNZ put up its hand to be like, we really want to champion this. And so they've made an entire week dedicated to the SDGs. And so thank you for taking part in today's webinar. You can still get involved with some of the other webinars that we've got coming up, as like I said, the one on Friday, but we also want to celebrate what are you doing already in the SDG space. And there are two ways we'd like you to get involved in this. One is to check out our Goal Getters competition. So Goal Getters is a competition that opened on Friday last week, and it's running until this Friday. And we are asking all individuals, whānau, organisations, businesses across Aotearoa to show us how they are actioning one or more of the SDGs. There's details that you can check out on HRNZ's LinkedIn and socials page to learn more about how to get involved in the competition. And the winner will be drawn on Friday, and you win the most incredible sustainability prize pack. These are and some insane goodies, and it's HRNZ's way of recognising those that are champion the SDGs. And of course, there is the HRNZ Building Sustainability Through People Award. So there's a whole award dedicated to those that are actioning sustainability in HR. So that is just another way that HRNZ really want to highlight that those in HR have a massive part to play towards sustainable development. So please get involved. Cool. And I guess just to end, to summarise, I think this is a beautiful quote that really highlights what Amy and I are trying to get through, is you don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. So that is a beautiful metaphor around what your sustainability journey should look like. It can be a very daunting process. People tend to share and highlight only, the most amazing achievements that they're doing towards sustainability. That tends to be the benchmark, but actually it's just about starting. And that is where we hope the Sustainability Basics Guide is your tool. And I guess, that safety blanket to make you realize that that's what it's all about. So do use the resource. It's a fantastic resource that we've put a lot of time and energy into, and we're always keen to get your feedback on how we can improve it. And like Amy said, do get in touch if you have any other comments or questions. And we just want to say a huge thank you for taking part in today's webinar. We hope you enjoyed it.
Give yourselves a round of applause. Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks for joining. We'll be in touch soon with some stuff after the session, and it's been brilliant being able to talk to you about sustainability and sustainable development today.